Stellar officially joined the ERC-3643 Association. Now, unless you're the type who spends your free time digging through Ethereum developer proposals, you might be thinking, okay, cool, but what does that even mean? And honestly, that's the right question, because on the surface, ERC-3643 sounds like just another one of those boring technical standards that crypto nerds get excited about. But here's the thing, it's actually a huge deal not just for Ethereum, but for the entire conversation about how crypto plays with regulators, institutions, and the future of tokenization. And Stellar deciding to jump in here? That tells us a lot about where their head is at in 2025. So let's break it down in plain English. ERC-3643 is basically a framework for compliance in tokenized assets. Think of it as a way to bake regulatory rules directly into the tokens themselves. You know how ERC-20 became the standard for fungible tokens, all those coins and tokens that live on Ethereum? Well, ERC-3643 is like ERC-20's more mature cousin, designed specifically for the world of regulated assets. We're talking about securities, real estate tokens, private equity shares, all the stuff institutions care about but regulators obsess over. With ERC-3643, tokens can come preloaded with compliance features. Identity checks, transfer restrictions, whitelisting. It's like embedding a know your customer process inside the token itself. Now, why does this matter for Stellar? Because Stellar has always pitched itself as the blockchain for real-world use cases, remittances, humanitarian aid, tokenized assets, financial inclusion. That's their bread and butter. But one of the criticisms Stellar has faced over the years is that while it's super efficient and well-designed for payments, it hasn't always been at the center of the compliance conversation. Ripple took the heat with regulators, Ethereum built its standards with ERCs, but Stellar? It kind of flew under the radar. By joining the ERC-3643 Association, Stellar is basically planting a flag and saying, we're not just about fast payments, we're about regulated, compliant financial infrastructure. That's a massive shift in tone, and it's super strategic. Because here's the reality. In 2025, compliance is no longer optional. If you want to play with the big boys, banks, asset managers, governments, you need to show that you're not fighting regulation, you're building around it. And Stellar's move here screams that ambition loud and clear. Let me put it another way. In the early days of crypto, the vibe was very anti-regulation. We're building outside the system. We don't need your rules. We're decentralized. That energy worked for getting attention, but look where it left a lot of projects. Delisted, sued, or just sidelined because they couldn't scale in the real world. The projects that are thriving in 2025, the ones actually getting adoption, are the ones embracing compliance as a feature, not a bug. Think about it. BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF? 100% compliant. Franklin Templeton tokenizing funds on Stellar? Compliant to the letter. And now Stellar is stepping right into the ERC-3643 conversation, which is basically the epicenter of tokenization and compliance standards. So what exactly is Stellar hoping to get out of this? A couple of things jump out immediately. First, interoperability. By aligning with ERC-3643, Stellar ensures it can play nice with Ethereum-based infrastructure. Let's not kid ourselves. Ethereum is still the king of tokenization, at least in terms of developer base and institutional pilots. But Ethereum alone can't handle the scale institutions want. Stellar has the rails for speed and low cost. By joining this association, Stellar positions itself as the complementary layer. Hey, you want regulated tokens? Sure, keep building them with ERC-3643 on Ethereum. But when you need fast settlement and global reach, route them through Stellar. It's a smart positioning play. Second, credibility. Associations like this are all about signaling. They show regulators, enterprises, and financial institutions that Stellar isn't just winging it. It's aligning with global standards, joining the same table as the heavy hitters, and saying, we're here to build the next chapter of finance with you, not against you. For institutional adoption, that signaling is everything. And third, future-proofing. The tokenization trend is only getting bigger. We've already seen trillions of dollars in assets earmarked for digital rails over the next decade. ERC-3643 is one of the strongest contenders to be the default standard for how those assets get tokenized. If Stellar wants to be part of that story, it has to plug into the standard early. Waiting until later would risk being left out. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Analysts are looking at this and saying, this is Stellar's way of moving beyond just payments into being a full-spectrum blockchain for institutional finance. Influencers, on the other hand, are hyping it as proof that Stellar is going institutional in a big way. Don't sleep on XLM. Both takes are valid, but the truth is somewhere in the middle. Stellar has always had the tech for payments, but payments alone don't create a trillion-dollar ecosystem. Tokenization does. And this move positions Stellar squarely in that game. Another angle we can't ignore is competition. Stellar isn't the only blockchain chasing compliance credibility. Ripple has been pushing into regulated corridors. Ethereum obviously dominates the standards conversation. Even smaller players like Algorand and Tezos are fighting for that regulated token niche. So Stellar joining ERC-3643 is a way of saying, we're not sitting this one out. We're right there with the rest of you. And given Stellar's partnerships, Franklin Templeton, MoneyGram, NGOs, and potentially central banks, it could actually leapfrog some of the others by combining compliance with proven real-world integrations. Let me pause here and paint a picture. Imagine a future where tokenized assets become the norm, not just ETFs but stocks, bonds, private equity, real estate, even carbon credits. All of those need compliance baked in. That's ERC-3643. Now imagine those tokens needing to move quickly and cheaply across borders. That's Stellar. See the alignment? By joining the association now, Stellar is making sure that when the tokenization floodgates open, it's standing right at the crossroads, ready to be the highway for compliant assets. And honestly, that's why I think this move matters so much. It's not just about today's partnerships. It's about positioning Stellar for the next decade of finance. Compliance isn't sexy. It doesn't generate meme-worthy headlines, but it's the foundation on which the biggest financial shifts are going to be built. Stellar clearly understands that, and by leaning into ERC-3643, it's signaling to the world, we're ready to scale responsibly. Now, let me throw in one last thought to wrap this first section. This move also reflects Stellar's growing maturity as a project. Remember when Stellar was just known as Ripple's cousin? Or when it was mostly talked about in the context of NGO partnerships? That's all still part of its DNA, but this is Stellar stepping into the role of a grown-up blockchain, saying, we're not just fast and cheap, we're compliant, we're institutional, and we're ready for prime time. And that, my friends, is a narrative shift worth paying attention to. Because in 2025, being fast is nice, but being compliant and credible, that's the real superpower. You know, one of the things people often misunderstand about crypto is that the narrative isn't always about speed or cost or even decentralization anymore. In 2025, the battlefield has shifted. The real competition is compliance. It sounds boring on the surface, right? Compliance, regulations, legal frameworks. But let me tell you something, compliance is becoming the moat, the secret sauce, the deciding factor for which blockchain protocols will actually survive and thrive when the dust settles. And Stellar's decision to join the ERC-3643 Association is a loud, clear statement. We're playing the long game. Think about it for a moment. The last decade of crypto was defined by hype cycles. We saw the ICO boom of 2017, DeFi summer in 2020, the NFT craze in 2021, the metaverse push in 2022, and the institutional adoption push in 2023 and 2024. But each time, the same question kept popping up. Is this legal? Is this compliant? That question has crushed projects faster than any market crash. Entire ecosystems collapsed not because the technology didn't work, but because regulators swooped in. Look at what happened with Ripple's long legal battle with the SEC. Look at the dozens of exchanges that vanished when regulators tightened AML and KYC rules. So when Stellar says, hey, we're aligning ourselves with ERC-3643, the token standard built for real-world assets, with compliance baked right into its DNA, that's not a minor move. That's a strategic masterstroke. ERC-3643 isn't just another token format. It's designed to meet the needs of financial institutions. We're talking about rules for identity, transfer restrictions, and on-chain compliance frameworks that make regulators breathe easier and institutions more willing to play ball. By adopting this standard, or more accurately, by joining the association that governs it, Stellar is essentially saying, we're ready to scale within the system, not outside it. Now, some people in the crypto space don't like hearing that. There's a faction of die-hard decentralization maximalists who want nothing to do with compliance. They see regulators as the enemy, and they think building within the system means betraying the ideals of crypto. But here's the reality check. Institutions control the big money. Governments control the legal rails. And if you want mainstream adoption, if you want to see trillions, not billions, of dollars flow through blockchain, compliance is non-negotiable. That's why this move matters so much. It shows Stellar understands the playing field in 2025. And honestly, it sets them apart from a lot of projects still clinging to an outdated, move fast and break things mentality. That worked in the early days of Web3. It doesn't work anymore when pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and multinational banks are circling the space, asking, which network can we actually trust to handle our assets? Another angle to this is how ERC-3643 directly ties into the tokenization of real-world assets, or RWAs. This has been one of the hottest topics of 2024 and 2025. BlackRock, Franklin Templeton, JP Morgan, and a whole host of other big names have been experimenting with tokenizing bonds, equities, funds, real estate, you name it. But the big barrier has always been compliance. If you tokenize a $500 million bond on-chain, regulators want to know who's allowed to hold it, who's authorized to trade it, what happens if sanctions are applied. ERC-3643 addresses those exact issues by allowing programmable compliance. And now, with Stellar stepping into that conversation, it's clear they want to be more than just a payments blockchain. They want to be a compliance-first platform for real-world finance. Let's break this down in human terms. Imagine you run a huge bank in Europe. You want to tokenize some of your funds on-chain because it's faster, cheaper, and more transparent. But you're not going to do it on a chain where literally anyone can buy, sell, or transfer the asset with no restrictions. That's a recipe for regulatory disaster. You need a blockchain that says, we can limit transfers to accredited investors. We can enforce KYC. We can make sure this asset doesn't accidentally end up in the hands of someone in a sanctioned country. That's exactly what ERC-3643 was designed to do. And now Stellar is raising its hand saying, we support this vision too. The timing couldn't be better. Around the world in 2025, regulations are solidifying. Europe has MiCA, the US is slowly inching toward clear rules, Asia is setting up its own frameworks, and Africa and LATAM are moving quickly to regulate stablecoins and tokenized assets. Compliance is no longer optional. It's the ticket to the game. So Stellar's move isn't just about technology alignment. It's about planting their flag in the ground, saying, we're not just chasing the next hype cycle, we're building a sustainable future. Now, let's zoom in on the psychology of this move. Institutions like predictability. They like frameworks. They like knowing there are guardrails. And when Stellar shows up as part of ERC-3643, it tells institutional players, we get it. We speak your language. We're not here to fight you. We're here to work with you. That is how you build trust. And trust, not just tech, is what drives adoption. One of the smartest aspects here is how Stellar balances its identity. On one hand, it has always branded itself as a people-first blockchain, focused on financial inclusion, remittances, and cross-border payments for underserved markets. On the other hand, with this compliance-first move, it's showing it can also serve the top end of finance. The institutions, the banks, the asset managers. That dual positioning is rare. You don't often see a blockchain that can be both grassroots and institutional, but Stellar is threading that needle beautifully. And let's be clear, this isn't a small pivot. This could change the narrative around Stellar entirely. For years, critics dismissed Stellar as just another payments chain, or the little sibling of Ripple. But joining ERC-3643 puts Stellar in the compliance and tokenization conversation, right alongside Ethereum, Polygon, and other major players. It tells the market, don't underestimate us. There's also the competitive angle. Ethereum has been the king of tokenization experiments, but it's expensive and often congested. Polygon, Avalanche, and others have tried to capture the institutional market. But Stellar brings something unique: a proven track record with stablecoins, remittances, and real-world usage. Adding compliance tools to that foundation makes them a very serious contender for institutional deals. So, compliance as a strategy, it's not sexy, but it's powerful. It's about saying, we know where the market is headed. We're not chasing hype. We're building for durability. And that's why Stellar's ERC-3643 move is so much bigger than it looks on paper. It's a statement of intent, a declaration that they're ready for the next phase of blockchain adoption, where compliance and trust aren't barriers. They're the keys to unlocking trillions in value. What's interesting, though, is how influencers framed it. Some of the biggest YouTube and TikTok personalities in the crypto space weren't just reporting the news, they were contextualizing it. They were saying things like, "This isn't just Stellar making a move. This is Stellar signaling that the compliance wars are heating up. Every major blockchain is going to have to pick a side. Are you going to be the rebel, or are you going to be the partner institutions trust?" That framing hit home with a lot of retail investors who might not have understood what ERC-3643 even meant but could feel the importance behind it. Then you had the media. Outlets like CoinDesk, The Block, and even some mainstream financial publications picked it up quickly. What stood out in their coverage was the narrative shift. They weren't treating Stellar like a side note anymore. Instead, they were putting them in the same sentence as Ethereum, Polygon, and other heavyweights in the tokenization race. One article I read basically said, with Stellar aligning itself to ERC-3643, the compliance-first RWA ecosystem is becoming less about Ethereum dominance and more about a multi-chain future where trust and interoperability will decide the winners. That's a huge leap in perception for Stellar. But maybe the most compelling reactions came from institutions already experimenting with tokenization. A few executives hinted that this move would make them more comfortable testing Stellar in pilot programs. One even said off the record, "The thing we worry about most is regulatory blowback. If Stellar is aligning itself with compliance-first standards, that's a signal they're not just innovating, they're de-risking the process for us." That's huge. It means this isn't just about hype or headlines. It's about Stellar opening real doors with big money players. Even retail investors seem to pick up on the significance. On Reddit and Discord channels, you could see people saying, "This is bullish. Institutions don't care about meme coins, they care about compliance. Stellar is finally playing the right game." Of course, others joked that it was boring news. But boring in crypto often means sustainable. And sustainability is what makes a token stand the test of time. Another angle worth noting is how competitors reacted. Polygon, Avalanche, and even Ethereum-centric commentators started debating what this meant for their ecosystems. Some shrugged it off, saying, "Stellar is late to the game." Others admitted that Stellar's reputation for stability and real-world partnerships could make them a dark horse in the compliance race. And honestly, that dark horse narrative might be the most powerful one. Stellar isn't always in the spotlight, but when they make a move, it's often deliberate, and this one was no exception. At the end of the day, the industry reactions boiled down to a split. Skeptics who think compliance kills innovation, and realists who see compliance as the key to unlocking mass adoption. But here's the important part: whether people loved it or hated it, they were talking about Stellar. And in crypto, mindshare is half the battle. If people are debating your strategy, dissecting your moves, and comparing you to the giants, you're already winning. So what's the takeaway from the reactions? Stellar's move wasn't just a technical or regulatory play. It was a narrative shift. It forced people to reconsider what Stellar is and what role it might play in the future of tokenization. And from where I'm sitting, that might be the biggest win of all. So here's where we land after unpacking all this. Stellar joining the ERC-3643 Association might not sound flashy to the casual observer. It's not a meme coin pump. It's not a celebrity endorsement. It's not some crazy airdrop. But in the bigger picture, this is one of the smartest, most calculated moves Stellar could have made in 2025. Why? Because it's future-proofing. It's positioning Stellar not just for today's headlines, but for tomorrow's institutions. When you bake compliance into your DNA, you're not just chasing hype, you're building something regulators can trust, banks can adopt, and investors can actually rely on without worrying the whole thing will collapse when new rules drop. That's the difference between being a speculative play and being part of the financial system itself. And let's be honest, that's where this whole industry is heading. Tokenization of real-world assets isn't a maybe anymore. It's already happening. Governments, asset managers, and global banks are moving at full speed. The question isn't if blockchain will power financial markets, but which blockchains will be allowed to carry the weight. By stepping into ERC-3643, Stellar is raising its hand and saying, "We're ready. Put us in the game." Now, will everyone love this? No. Some will say it's a sellout move, that Stellar is bowing to the system instead of fighting it. But here's the thing, crypto doesn't exist in a vacuum. If the mission is adoption, if the mission is impact, then you've got to build bridges, not walls. Stellar's compliance-first strategy is a bridge, connecting the ideals of open finance with the reality of regulated markets. So here's my takeaway for you. Don't sleep on this. These kinds of moves don't cause fireworks overnight, but they lay the foundation for the next wave of growth. When institutions start rolling out tokenized assets and need a blockchain partner that ticks all the boxes, fast, reliable, affordable, and compliant, Stellar just put itself squarely in the running. If you're following this space, now is the time to pay attention. Watch how Stellar positions itself in the coming months. Watch how institutions respond. And most importantly, ask yourself, when trillions of dollars in assets start moving on-chain, which blockchains are going to be trusted to carry them? Because that's where the real value is going to be captured. And if you found this breakdown helpful, do me a favor, stick around. We've got more deep dives, more market insights, and more no-fluff conversations about where crypto is really headed. Hit that subscribe button, drop a comment with your take on Stellar's compliance move, and let's keep this conversation going. Because trust me, the next few years in crypto are going to be wild, and you don't want to just watch from the sidelines.